Wir sind echt mega stolz, dass uns gelungen ist, die ikonische Susan Credle dazu zu kriegen, in ihrem vollen Terminplan für uns mal richtig mit ihren Teams ihre besten Cases zum Thema Ideas Create Reality uns vorzustellen. Und zwar, er sagt, wer ist denn das? Also Susan Credle ist Partner und CCO Worldwide von FC Global, die Agentur des Jahres in Cannes wurden und die 3 unglaublich für unser Programm passende Award-Winning Cases gemacht haben, die in allen möglichen Awards, ja, Gott sei Dank sehr abgeräumt haben. Der eine ist Boards of Change. Wir erinnern uns, es gab diese Black Lives Matter Demonstrationen, es gab ganz viel Graffitis, es gab ja, überall Holzwände, die bemalt waren. Was hat diese Agentur gemacht? Das ist die Arbeit Boards of Change. Die haben diese wunderbaren Holz genommen und haben daraus Wahlabstimmungs Cubes, was heißt das auf Deutsch? Boxen, Kabinen, genau, Wahlkabinen hergestellt. Mit einem wahnsinnigen PR-Effekt. Und zwar in Mengen, dass eben alle tatsächlich bei der Wahl was verändern konnten. Dann der Contract of Change. Das ist, wenn man sich mal Amerika vor Augen führt, da ist das mit dem Biobauernhof und Bioland, das sind noch ganz weit von entfernt. Ich hoffe, ich ärgere jetzt keinen, der daherkommt und denkt, na super, jetzt werde ich auch noch beleidigt. Aber das ist wirklich so, da gibt es halt ganz krasse Contracts mit den Getreideabnehmerfirmen und den riesigen Konzernen und die Bauern sind da im Würgegriff. Und Michelob und ein anderer Kunde von denen hat gesagt, nee, wir garantieren euch, liebe Bauern, dass wir euch das Zeug abnehmen. Wir brauen daraus dann eben dieses Bier. Und, für diese Zusage könnt ihr investieren, weil die Umstellung von konventionellem Agriculture zu Bio, könnt ihr euch vorstellen, ist sehr kostintensiv. Und wenn die eine Unsicherheit ist, traut sich da kaum jemand. Und das haben die als Agentur ins Leben gerufen für ihren Kunden und haben damit sozusagen jetzt auch PR-trächtig mal den Change in Richtung Bio eingeläutet. Und dann, last but not least, wieder ein Change, und zwar Big Issue Change. In Corona-Zeiten haben die Big Issue, ihr wisst es, die Obdachlosenzeitung, ich glaube in London, hatten ja kein Einkommen mehr, und weil da keiner mehr auf der Straße war, keiner mehr gekauft. Und dafür haben sie sich auch was überlegt. Also Ideas Create Reality, in diesem Fall auch Support. Ich bin jetzt mega stolz, dass die ist natürlich nicht hier, aber ich bin mega stolz, dass ich sich wochenlang Zeit genommen habe, mit den ganzen Teams für uns diesen Content zu produzieren. Und will jetzt mal sagen, Film ab.
Hi, I'm Susan Credle, the Global Chair and Chief Creative Officer of FCB, and I would like to thank the ADC Germany for inviting me to speak with you all today. I'm very sorry that I could not be there in person, but we continue to question what COVID's up to, and I had some personal commitments in May that I could not adjust. But nonetheless, I am here, and hopefully we can have a very nice visit virtually as we talk about some of the work that FCB has been doing in the past. The first piece that we're going to talk about is Boards of Change, which was done out of Chicago. This work was created after George Floyd was murdered in 2020 by a policeman. Outrage went across the country, and that outrage was met with many store owners putting plywood up in their windows, anticipating vandalism. And while there was some vandalism, most of the boards were met with artistic messages of frustration, hope, compassion, anger. The team in Chicago saw these boards and realized that something important was happening, and they got to work with an idea. And I'll let the case study introduce you to it.
Overnight, Minneapolis on fire.
You want more of the people you're supposed to protect.
The damage was widespread. Windows shattered, many businesses now boarded up.
boards were on windows of storefronts because people knocked out the windows because they felt like they didn't have a voice. And now he's turned them into a voting pool, a big FU.
There's a constant attack on the civil rights of black voters in this country.
This moment now is an opportunity for us to channel this energy into constructive, lasting, democratic engagement.
1 in 5 eligible people in this country are not even registered to vote.
I will be one of the examples that say, yes, we do have a voice.
Gotta get on board.
Now's the time.
Demand a transformation, a systemic transformation, and that we have a seat at the table.
And now the art of getting out the vote. Kevin Tim.
Boards of Change. The Chicago Board of Elections is expecting record-breaking turnout.
It's my pleasure to now have a conversation with the executive producer on this project, Carolina Velez.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. In May 2020, when George Floyd passed away, the world was shook. We were already kind of upside down, and this tragic event happened, and we felt like the rug got pulled from beneath us even more. And within weeks, we saw these beautiful boards come up on storefronts. And that's how this story was born.
So it was interesting. So that was in the spring. The elections were in November. How fast did you go from, first the boards go up as sort of a anticipation of destruction and hostility. They're met instead with artwork and outpourings of feelings from a marginalized community. When did the team start to say something important is happening here and we can basically hack what's happening and put these messages of hope, frustration, desire, wishes into action?
Like you said, there's kind of a turning moment, right, where the boards went up. They were blank at first. And then all of a sudden, from one second to another, it's like every board you saw had some meaningful message on it or a beautiful piece of art that went along with it. And we just realized that it was kind of an artistic moment within this moment of history that was happening. And at some point, these boards were going to come down, right? We had to preserve it, and we had to carry it forward in some way that meant something and wasn't exploiting the moment, but actually helped push the importance of the moment forward.
It sounds like that the first piece of it was this is history and we need to preserve it. When did the caring about the boards, the meaning of the boards, realizing this was an historic moment, turn to a space for voter registration?
I think knowing that these messages were going up and that artists and community members, business owners were able to show their support for what had just happened with George Floyd with these pieces of art, we knew that these were voices, these were local voices that needed to be heard, and they could be used to parlay change through voting. And I think that's really where the idea was born with Tim and Niels. So as they saw the work going up, they thought, we need to move this forward. This needs to be something more than just art. It has to take the words that are so important on these boards and push it into affecting change through votership.
Yes, and the first thing that you did with the boards is turn them into registration booths, correct?
We initially had a press conference with Mayor Lightfoot, and they were just a flat backdrop for that. And that was really a press conference calling for change for the city amid all the unrest and what we knew was something that needed to change in the city and also globally. And then eventually we built our booths from there. So we actually built our voting booths with a carpenter, designed them in 3D, and then got to work and put them in communities.
How many booths were there?
We had about 10 hero booths.
And they went across the city. They traveled, right?
Yes. So we did a big launch in Daley Plaza with the mayor, and they were all lined up there. But then more importantly, we went to marginalized communities and got together with community leaders. And we really made a point to get to know these people and bring out people that were not only involved in making the initial artwork so that they could understand how their art was being pushed forward, but also just people in the community that cared, that wanted to have a voice, that were part of being marginalized themselves and understood this message more than anyone else.
I wonder if these booths, because they were made up of the voices of the frustrated, the hurt, actually did help sort of pull the voting community and this community that does not feel heard closer together. I mean, maybe that is why we actually saw a significant change in registering to vote.
I mean, I think, listen, these boards existed organically in their communities. So it's something that they were seeing long before we took them and made something new out of them. So it wasn't a foreign thing coming into their world. It was something that they were used to. And I think that was probably relatable, and that helped build a little bit of trust.
And then talk to me a little bit about the scanning piece.
So there was a QR code. You know, big priority was, how do we make this easy for people? Anything related to government work or paperwork is typically complicated. So how do we simplify the process? Most people have a smartphone. So if we put a QR code, we can directly link people to a place where they can register to vote. And that was the main function. And then there was also a QR code that honored the artists. So it would take people to the artist's Instagram page, because this wouldn't have happened without them. That was such a big part of this project. We always kept those relationships alive with the artists from the beginning, and we kept them along for the ride. So we wanted to honor them.
You're using words like honor and respect and authenticity, and I think that's one of the reasons this idea resonated across the world, because it did contain all of those words and more, in the spirit and the respect with which you all approached bringing this idea to life. What are some of the bumps in the road that you ran into where you thought, this isn't going to work? I don't know if we're going to be able to pull this off.
I mean, I was scared, just baseline scared, because it was a scary time in history. And as a person of color myself, I didn't want to exploit the moment. I wanted to make sure, I don't pretend to know the Black experience, but I do have a responsibility as a person of color to be an ally to the Black community. And as one of the minorities on the project, I was fearful that people wouldn't understand.
It has to be appropriate for what we're going to do next, or what we're asking people to do. And I feel that paying attention to words like that when you're entering into social good are really important, because I don't think anybody goes out to put harmful things into the world, but we can get it wrong. And I do think that you stating that if you had not had the local artist support, you might have said, we shouldn't do this, or we can't be a part of this. Did you know that spidey sense? Did you ever have that little moment where you said, this actually is going the right way, and what made you feel that way?
Just every time we went to someone, whether it be an artist or a community leader who is fighting day to day for racial injustice in their community, sees it and wants to make a change, they saw the idea. And honestly, we were never met with a bad feeling about it. And that's quite unique, right? Because ideas are quite polarizing, especially one around something like this. So that was the comfort that we had. We had to lean into the support that we got day to day. It was still scary, but that helped.
I think that is a great message for us all to take with us as we go on these social journeys, that get close to the community that you are wanting to support, that you are involving, and make sure that you listen hard, not just talk loud, and how important diversity is on a team. And you mentioned, that you were a diverse part of the team, and you came with, I think, a compassion and an understanding and a want to be respectful to the work and to the people that were being honored and messaged to. What is the importance of diversity and creativity in teams today that you've seen emerge like over the last 10 years?
Candidly, like specific to this project, I would say I had to check my fellow teammates on a regular basis, not because they didn't have the best of intentions, but because they don't understand the experience quite like a person of color might. And I think that in itself is just how important it is to have a diverse team, to constantly be checking each other. It really doesn't come down to intentions a lot of the time. It comes down to the way you were raised, the experience that you had. And so without a different set of minds, you're in a tough place.
Yeah, we talk about intention and impact, and your intention might have been one thing, but what's your impact going to be? And I think you're exactly right. More diverse voices around the camera, around the table, I think get us to that authentic place that does matter. How exhausted? What was it? Just an exhausting experience?
It was. I definitely cried when I lost a few boards along the way, which just shows how emotionally invested you get in projects at times. But we just acted quickly. I mean, it was all about, it was this balance of like really wanting to build relationships quickly, but also nothing's built in a day, and trust isn't built in a day, and no one's going to trust you from one phone call to another. So it was persistence, like just getting on the phone with people, FaceTime with people, making sure that they knew that we had the right intentions. So it was kind of that pressure of speed, but also always be respectful. And if it takes a little longer, that's part of the risk that we had to take.
Well, Carolina, I appreciate you sharing so many words of wisdom and advice as the executive producer on this beautiful piece of work. And thank you for the compassion, the passion, the caring, the authenticity. And I am so glad it worked out.
Thank you, Susan.
It's important to do good work in our industry. We believe at FCB on our best day, we do our best work on our biggest brands. And that means our brands need to step up and do good in the world. Michelob Ultra Organic did a piece of work a few years ago that was called Contract for Change. It continues to exist in the world and is helping more farmers go organic every day. Let's take a look.
Farming is no longer about quality. It's about producing more, faster, cheaper. Most farmers would love to grow natural food again, but we're on a treadmill that we can't get off of. Transitioning to organic takes 3 years of significant investment, and you might not have a buyer at the end of the road. We sign today, and it guarantees us a buyer for organic product in 3 years.
Contract for Change guarantees farmers who sign today that Michelob Ultra will be their first organic customer 3 years from now when the organic transition is complete. That certainty of having a buyer removes the biggest barrier to going organic.
During the 3-year transition, our production drops, so we lose money.
This is another big reason why only 1% of farmland is organic. The contract includes a commitment from Anheuser-Busch to buy the crops during the transition for its yearly production of non-organic beers at a 25% higher price, so the farmers keep the same income. Finally, the contract includes in-depth training through the most important agricultural organizations.
Calling all Idaho farmers. If you've ever considered going organic, please call us. Together, we can change the future of your farm.
Michelob Ultra Organic.
Michelob Ultra.
That is helping organic farmers.
Once the farms are organic, they can not only grow ingredients for Michelob Ultra Pure Gold, but also for hundreds of other brands.
It's beautiful to see life come back to the farm again. That's why I became a farmer.
Niels, I'm so excited to talk to you today about Contract for Change that you all did out of Chicago for Michelob Ultra Organic. At the ADC Germany, the theme of this conference is ideas becoming reality. So I'd like to start there, which is, where did this idea come from? And let's talk about how it became a reality. So, when's the moment that you were like, I think we could do this and this would make a difference in the world and for our client?
Thanks. Yeah, it's actually, it's a good question, because I don't think it came about as most ideas do. Actually, the first time the idea came out into the world was already back in 2018. It was actually one of the very first briefs that Tim and I, and Tim is my creative partner since it's now 12 years. We got this brief for Michelob Ultra Pure Gold, one of our very first briefs when we moved to Chicago. And it was actually a Super Bowl brief. So they were looking for spots. I think it was 60-second spots at a time for Michelob Ultra Pure Gold. And the brief was all about, organic is hard. So we want to put this beer out into the world. And of course, it costs a little bit more. So we want to show that everything that goes into making organic and why it's better. So we put a bunch of spots against the wall. Tim and I, we always like to think about stuff that's more than just an ad. We like to think about how can we do something beyond telling this story? Can we actually impact what's going on here? And we looked at why what organic is so hard, and we found that the hardest part through research was actually the transition into organic. And that inspired us to okay, then as a brand that's all about organic, can we do something about that? Can we play a role in that? And we started thinking, and we put this idea on the wall. And it was this little one-pager, and I believe it didn't have the name Contract for Change. I believe it was called Contract for Sustainable Agriculture. Very bad name. And we put that up amongst all those great TV campaigns. And I remember it was Fred Lebrun, who was doing his tour by the wall, and he spotted that idea, and he said oh, what is this? This is interesting. And he read it. He read the line, the write-up, and he was like, this is great. We need to do this. And that's how it made its way into a Super Bowl brief. Unfortunately, that year, we weren't able to realize Contract for Change because obviously it takes a lot of time to develop something like that. And we didn't have much time. It was already October or November, maybe, Super Bowl coming up very, very soon after that. So in the end, they went with a more traditional spot at that point, but the client really loved the idea. And they were like, this is great. This solves a big business problem, but it has so much more potential. This is a long-term thing. This can really have an impact. We still want to do this at a later stage. That was kind of how they looked at it at that point. And of course, we hear that a lot. Yeah, we love it, maybe later. But in this case, actually, after a couple of months, they came back with it and they said hey, now the madness of Super Bowl is over. We still love this idea. Let's do it. And that's how the ball started rolling.
I think it's really interesting that a lot of times we I think, I don't want to say get lazy, but we get briefs and we focus so much on answering the brief that we don't look beyond the brief. And I think that Chicago has been leading the way in our company with beyond briefs, or what we're calling now the and briefs. And I think you demonstrated proactively, you know, how creativity can show up outside of the specific brief. And by giving by telling yourself, we're going to go beyond what we're being asked to do and look for something that feels more interesting to you as a creative and to the business. And do you find you and Tim are often looking beyond the brief to find something that's more interesting to you and to the business?
I think inherently had that type of thinking at the core. And so we're kind of like used to thinking that way, like thinking about a brief without any media in mind, which frees you up, I think. Otherwise, you're going to start looking for, oh, we need a radio spot, or we need, you know, a print ad or whatever. And if you remove that kind of checkbox, suddenly it's more like, how can we solve this, or how can we tell this in the most interesting way? And I think that's often helpful, even if you get these checkboxes for a brief and it says in the 30-second radio spot. Yeah, okay, sure, but what is the actual goal here if we leave that aside?
Yeah, I think that you know, it's also interesting that when you talk about the timing. So this idea was born out of a Super Bowl brief. I think it's very interesting. We've had a lot of ideas that have done good things for our clients and good things for our reputation and our company that took time. And I think a lot of times we abandon ideas because time becomes the issue. And how did you find the patience? You know, what was it, 2 to 3 years really, by the time this thing actually was a story that we could tell. Did you lose faith at any moment? Did you get impatient? Did you ever want to just say, forget it, it's too hard?
Yeah, I mean, quite ironically, just like it takes 3 years to transition to organic for a farmer, it pretty much took us 3 years to really roll out the idea. So do we sometimes lose faith in it? Yes and no. I think obviously there's always going to be some challenges along the road, and sometimes you think, oh well, that's the end of it, that's going to kill the idea. But I think what was really key here is the client and how much they love the idea and put all the effort and time and resources into it. It didn't feel like it was going to die along the way. Like once it came back after that Super Bowl round, you could really feel like, okay, we're gonna do this. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but that gave a lot of confidence. And I think that kind of partnership is crucial when you think about these ideas that, you know, that are so long term. So yeah, that's I think the biggest factor here.
You know, you touched on something that I think is really, really important, which is partnerships. When you think about your relationship with Michelob Ultra, obviously this was a huge undertaking and required them to be hugely vested in the idea. Too, when did you feel that partnership developing?
Yeah, I think it did strengthen our partnership with the client. This being quite a huge endeavor, and you know, having so many different elements to it, it required a good partnership along the way. Especially then also thinking about the Super Bowl element. Okay, it didn't happen first year, but then the second year when it came back, together with the client, we decided, hey, we'll bring this story in a slightly different way, which became 6 for 6 pack with a consumer-facing element now onto the biggest stage, Super Bowl. So that gave, you know, yet another that generated yet another element to this campaign. And yeah, I think the relationship grew along the way as we saw also the enthusiasm of the farmers, which was another partner in this actually.
I guess, you know, when you tackle a big idea like this, that's not just about making a piece of film, but it's really about, you know, it's called a contract for change. This is there's legal issues in this, there's commitment. And I just wonder, you know, when did the client step up and help you get through any part of this in a way that demonstrated a true partnership and a participation in the creation of the idea?
Absolutely, because this did require a heavy lift on their end internally. It required pretty much a business transformation, like on a logistical scale, legal, as you said, and then of course the marketing part of it. And they really went all out, and they got us in touch with the agronomists, for example, and agronomists for a company like Anheuser-Busch. They are the people who know everything about the soil, about the crops, and they have a close relationship with the farmers. And they played actually a crucial role in this from the client side. So we were on the phone with them a lot. We flew out to Idaho to go meet them, to go together with them to talk to the farmers. Like one of them actually, our radio spot it's not a professional voice. It's actually one of the agronomists of Anheuser-Busch, for example, who has this tie to the community of farmers. So having his voice in the radio commercial, having him address the farmers and say, hey, it's Doug from AB. And most of the farmers know who that is. And they're like, hey, we have a new program. It's called Contract for Change. And if you're thinking of going organic, you know, call us. Like, fact that it went that deep, I think, was really important.
I you know, it's fascinating because I think so many times my visualization of creatives is they've got headphones on and they're in front of a computer and they're creating, and it's so refreshing to think about you all out in the field talking to farmers, and I think it really shows just how interesting this job can get when you look beyond, you know, the expected, that you dream bigger than what advertising looks like. And I like to call it advertising with a capital A, which is it's not that the traditional media isn't powerful, but bigger ideas that exist in an ecosystem that you feed really start to make our jobs far more interesting. We're in the award season right now. Are you creating or growing anything you're excited about?
Yeah, definitely. We're entering a ton of new projects, which is pretty exciting, because now that the program has evolved a bit more, we're getting some learnings, we're getting more data, we're getting more results, which is great, especially for the creative effectiveness case. So we have like a nice file there with additional results. And then, of course, the project has been evolving because some of those farmers, as you said, like it's been a very long journey. Some of these farmers who, I think the first one started the transition probably the summer or the end, I think the end of 2019, when we started to run a pilot with a small group of farmers. They will complete their organic transition by the end of this year.
Wow.
So that's a really big milestone for the program. And that's going to be like a huge thing. The first time we're going to be able to brew Michelob Ultra Pure Gold with grains that come out of the Contract for Change. That gets me pretty excited. So that's really cool. But yeah, that's a bit of an overview.
That's great. You know, it's interesting because at FCB we say never finished, and some people laugh and say that sounds exhausting. But I think this idea is the epitome of what we mean by never finished ideas, which is ideas that we put into the world that keep giving and keep keep performing. And you all definitely put a never finished idea into the world, and like ADC Germany is saying, ideas become reality. It's so beautiful to know that the first Michelob Ultra Pure Gold liquid will be made by your idea. So congratulations, and thanks for giving us some time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to talk about our relationship with The Big Issue, which is a newspaper that is given out by homeless people in London. This idea came about because of the pandemic. LinkedIn, Inferno, and The Big Issue got together to solve a problem, which was how do homeless people sell newspapers on street corners when nobody's in the street? Let's take a look.
Big Issue, folks. Big Issue.
The Big Issue is a UK magazine sold on the streets by people in need to provide a positive alternative to begging. We try to elevate those less fortunate in the eyes of society.
Big Issue, folks.
But then everything changed.
The Big Issue says it's facing a fight for its survival.
I miss my customers, my regulars. They're professionals, business people. It completely destroyed our industry. There was no people on the street.
We went from selling 80,000 magazines a week to 0. We needed a big change in our business. We recreated the vendor sales model online, and we chose to do it on LinkedIn because that's where 70% of our vendors' former customers were. Cross-referencing workplace locations on LinkedIn, we found people who worked near where our vendors used to sell, and we recreated that neighbourhood digitally. So the vendors could reconnect with the same professionals who used to walk past them every day.
Hi everyone, welcome to your first LinkedIn training. We're going to show you all the best ways to use the LinkedIn platform.
Social media is a place that really democratises people. Perceptions are made based on what we post. So now the vendors go from just asking people to buy the magazine on the street to sharing and talking about what's inside it.
And because every vendor had a personalised e-com trigger, they could make sales easily at whatever point they wanted in the conversations they were having online.
The programme has fundamentally shifted how we do business. We went from a conversion rate of 1 sale for every 50 interactions on the street to 1 sale for every 10 interactions on LinkedIn. But the bigger result is the permanent perception shift in how people see our vendors. They're professionals who have a right to be on LinkedIn.
Before, when I used to shout out Big Issue on the street, I would only be heard by the people that are around me. Now I get to be heard all the way around the world.
I'm so excited to speak to our managing director in London, Katy Wright. Katy?
So I think I'll start with the Big Issue. So I think actually, if people haven't heard of it, and actually if you even look at it as from a UK angle, it's probably looked upon as homeless people outside supermarkets, coffee shops, trying to sell a copy of a magazine in order to sort of have a job for the day. In terms of, it was set up years ago by essentially rather than just giving people money. So their entire purpose is around a hand up, not a hand out.
A hand up, not a hand out has really been the North Star of how we approach working with the Big Issue and the creative ideas that we come up with. And I do know, I heard that, when the pandemic hit, that even the client for a half a second was like, we just need to raise money for these people. And then everybody collectively said, nope, that's not what we do. We do hands up, not hands out. And so, I think that without that brand purpose, you might not have known how to stay the course in such a bizarre, unprecedented time of COVID. So what happened once you centered yourself? Where did this idea come from?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if fundamentally you have homeless people that are trying to almost work for themselves in terms of selling this magazine on the streets, well, that just simply couldn't happen anymore. So never more so was there a reason to be that partner, to use that North Star to guide what we did. Because what we aren't doing, we've never done, is like the charity fundraising part. That's almost like a separate machine. And actually, interestingly, I met with the CEO 2 weeks ago, and I'm not sure we even at the time understood the situation they were in. And he said we were 3 months away from, that was the end of the Big Issue. Big Issue's been around 25, 30 years, 3 months away, because they hadn't shifted their business fundamentally to, lots of media and ad revenue. If you haven't shifted to a digital sort of forum where you're seeking other ways of building up that revenue stream, then fundamentally, like lots of other businesses, they're in a real sort of difficult position. And I think that's where you come in as a true partner. And I think also being open to ideas that, whereas previously they may have been relatively uncomfortable, they couldn't be anymore. They couldn't shut them down. It couldn't just be around, oh, well, we'll just do what we normally do. And I think they know us as not being traditional. They know us as knowing and being aware of new technologies. So I call this there's 3 ingredients to it, and it always starts with a good idea, right? Mm-hmm. It always starts with a good idea. And then it's knowing, well, we've got the good idea, then you need the technology, and we've got the technology, and then you need the data. And those are really the 3 ingredients of raising profiles. And I think what's also fundamentally important is ideas can save businesses, and sort of like, oh, that's Katy's going a bit big here. But it's with this platform, they were able to shift their business, to think differently, to look to other partnerships, and be around that hand up, not hand out. This isn't just about raising money. This is about creating an environment of social enterprise where, there is an ever fulfilling prophecy, so that not only were they prepared for the future, but we were looking to the future because we had to, and we were working as their partner in order to deliver that. So, the vendors were, if I explain the idea really simply, you would walk to work and you would tend to buy your Big Issue on your way to work. And it's really important that you bought that Big Issue, because they were there's studies around this, but just giving them £1, although they'd like it, that was just a handout. But this is them trying to sell as many copies of that magazine as possible, and then that magazine gets passed on, etc. But what we did is we were able to identify, based on where people worked, the locations of their nearest vendor, and their vendor was able to reach out to that person through LinkedIn and say, would you like to take up a subscription, thus fast tracking their subscription model. So it's an incredible campaign in that respect.
Yes, and it's interesting because a lot of the clients that I've spoken with over the last couple of years said that the things that they did that the catalyst was the pandemic or COVID, but they were things that should have been done anyway. So it's very interesting to think about this as it looks like it was an idea created in COVID, but it was actually COVID was an accelerant to an idea that needed to happen.
I don't know if I can say this, but I definitely can say this to the creative community. I'm not sure this idea would have happened had COVID not happened, because there would have been all these reasons not to do it. Whereas actually there were all these reasons to do it, because this was the only way to go. And I think they certainly wanted this model in place before, but they just hadn't accelerated it. And I think it's that people are always, it's always easier to do what you do and to what you've always done than to try something different and to be brave.
That seems to be a running theme on a lot of the work that lifted up to the top, is that it really was based on business problems and business solutions and understanding, how to be a partner. And I think too often we don't participate in the bigger conversations. We get a brief and it's like, okay, do an ad for this. And there's so much more opportunity to live above the brief and to be, like you said, and we've continued to hear the word, partners. And I think partnership, when I was judging Titanium last year, that was the running theme of the best work. It was all about partnership, trust, and wanting to do things that mattered. And also I think that, this work was not done to win awards. This work was done to help a community. And I think the authenticity of really believing that the creative work does matter, that the idea will affect reality, is what's making good work step up to becoming great work.
Yeah, 400% uplift in sales, 325% uplift in subscriptions, which then, as we all know, lead to ongoing sustainable business sales. I mean, hundreds of millions of impressions when you have a captivated audience. That is creative equals economic multiplier. That is us walking in to the partners that we work with and saying, we know we can have an impact on your business. And also all done very quickly.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit too about your partnership with LinkedIn. What was that like? How did it come about? How closely was the client, the agency, and LinkedIn locking arms to get this made?
It's the triangle, isn't it? I think LinkedIn is an incredible platform. They've always been open as a partner, partner portal. I think they were as much a part of the solution as I think they played their part as much as the client did, as much as we did in terms of coming up with the idea. And even I think adding to the idea. This isn't just money raising. This is that hand up, not a hand out. They see the social enterprise. That's all the things that LinkedIn stand for. So I would say it was a true partnership in that respect as well. As I said, it's the three ingredients.
It's a good message, I think, for the ADC and the people attending the ADC to understand the power of these platforms and treating them like new media, where you do take them on as partners in this storytelling and creating, which I think is new for a lot of people. That to treat them not just as a space, but as a organization that understands what their space has the power to do, and to listen and to grow with them is exciting. And I wanted to talk about, we do talk about creativity as an economic multiplier, and obviously this idea was an economic multiplier for the big issue and the salespeople of the big issue. But you also had a really interesting experience, which is this case was shown, I believe, at a CMO meeting in London, and the CMO from Virgin saw it.
So it was entered for an award, so we did enter it for an awards, and the CMO was judging the awards and said, this is exactly what we need. The CMO of Virgin, and they reached out and asked for us to do a presentation to their marketing team, which led to, look, this is the partner we need to work with on an idea that they've been having that they hadn't been able to bring to light, which is our sort of latest campaign. So with dyslexic thinking. But I think something you said, Susan, that's really important is to listen.
In this industry, we talk about pitching and not pitching, and should we be pitching? And I think I hope this is evidence of the future, which is good work gets you to more good work. And that if clients can recognize when people are making things that they care about, that's a good partnership, and that we don't need to go through all the exercise of creating and showing and strategizing. It's like, if you like what we did here, give us a chance to do it for you. And I actually wouldn't mind showing the dyslexic thinking piece to this audience, since it's very new, but I think it is another beautiful piece by Inferno that is a very simple idea, again, that has become a reality, and I think has the power to change a lot of lives. So thank you for talking with us about the big issue and for bringing up dyslexic thinking, and I hope the audience enjoys this new piece from your wonderful office.
Thanks, Susan.
much.